Hi, everybody. It's Cambrian, and today I'd like to talk about Andor and why Andor is not going to save Star Wars. It just won't. However, it is a step in the right direction. Okay, so the reason why it won't save Star Wars is, well, fairly simple. The era they're playing in is essentially going back to the same well that's already played out. As a result, it's forcing new stuff into an original foundation, while on the tracks of the only Kennedy era success, that being Rogue One. uh, this show is still failing in a few key areas, which keep it from being or feeling like proper Star Wars. Now, I'm just coming up with this off the top of my head as it kind of popped in. I've only just finished watching the 4th episode. Now, let me make this very clear. It's a very good show, and to an extent, that's a low bar, and it's a low bar because of how badly the rest, aside from, say, The Mandalorian, um, yeah, it's the best they've done so far. Now, the biggest problem with Andor is really the only major problem, and that is it's too slow. It's not boring, for me anyway. Um, the detail, the characters, like I understand who everybody is. This is great. It's fantastic, and nobody's a super whiz or a Mary Sue and all this kind of thing. It's just a show full of characters, and it's a great character story. But there's a lot of build up, and there's no payoff per episode. Now, the 4th episode has just set up an Ocean's 11 heist, and that's what's going to play out. Okay, great. I'm interested. I want to see. However, it's taking too long to get there. 4 episodes in, and our character has only just left the planet that he started on. A little bit of time wasted with the flashbacks, which are okay, but we're kind of tired of those thanks to Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett flogging it to death, flogging that gag to death, which really bogged down its own flow. But here, there's a story that's working to pay off. But there's a rule to these kind of to Star Wars specifically, and there has to be excitement and action. You can spend all the time in the world setting up stakes and bad guys and stuff like that here, but there's no excitement. There's tension. Sure, there's figuring out the stuff, but there's no excitement. Now, I can get a slower episode, or if you have to throw action in there at some point. And the action we have gotten is really minor. It's seconds of action over nearly 4 hours of content at this point. Now, even though if we look at the episodes here, what do we got? So we got 41 minutes, and we get the 2 deaths. Nothing happens here. Reckoning, we get a bit of a shootout, but we're talking less than a minute of actual action, or maybe just over a minute. Who knows? But it doesn't feel like much more than that. And nothing happens here. So so we got 40 minutes, so 41, 37, 42, 49. Yeah, we're still not even reaching an hour apiece. needs to be faster, guys. This is why it's not going to save Star Wars. Not enough action. We're seeing this is the kind of thing you develop for a 20 or more episode season, but you still have to put action in there. Going back to the well over and over again for this particular era is interesting and needs to be examined, but there has to be stuff happening. I'm going to go back and talk about an old show, The Incredible Hulk, starring Bill Bixby with Lou Ferrigno as the Hulk. They had a rule: 1 to 2 Hulk outs per episode. This guaranteed viewership for those that came to see the Hulk. Throughout the kids, whatever, whatnot, and they did that. And sometimes, if it was a tight budget or whatever, whatnot, sometimes there was always one. There might be only one Hulk out in an episode, but they always hit that one Hulk out, whether the reasons were contrived, silly, whatever. They made that mark because that's what people came to see. It's the title of the show. Andor is the title of this show. Star Wars is the secondary. It's just the setting in which the story is taking place in. So to a degree, we have to expect only so much going on, because it's all going to revolve around Andor. We get this. Awesome. Let's move on. With him going into the rebellion, we need to see the actual skill. We actually haven't seen any of his skills. He's fired his blaster a couple of times. We didn't see him steal that Imperial box thingy. He just had it. So when you're reintroducing a character, especially a prequel series for that character, you have to prove the point of that character. Their worth, and it has to meet the setting that it's set in. Andor is a Star Wars story. Yes, this is an occupation era set, story. However, the action or whatever combat doesn't have to be the action. There just has to be stuff going on that represents the threat of him getting caught or killed. And we know he makes it to Rogue One, but you still have to give the illusion of the threat of being caught or killed. And if that can be done by the acquisition of an Imperial piece like the one he had, then you have to show it. You have to show it, because that shows the value of the character and gives us the reason why for us to watch. He has to prove his worth. 4 episodes in, he hasn't done that yet. He's run around and hid and trying to finagle his way out. He's gotten into a blaster fight. One that lasted a couple of seconds. When you're not adhering to the base formula of, okay, you can have your drama, but you gotta have your action. You can have your tension, but you gotta have your payoff. You have to have a reason for people to show up each week, which is why shows like The Incredible Hulk way back in the day, when I was still a kid in single-digit age, that was the reason to watch, because you saw the Hulk, you saw him turn green, you saw him rip through his clothes and start throwing stuff and people around, and then running away after the Hulk out and the action scene was over. But you always got the action scene. You always got it. You got what you came for. We haven't gotten what we had 4 episodes of lures, things to lure us in, bait, but we're not getting a payoff yet. And depending on how, what is it, 3 episodes left, 4 episodes left, I'm not even sure. But 4 episodes in, and aside from episode 3, there's been nothing going on. A lot of setup. My favorite character in this is Stellan Skarsgård. He's the man. This should be his show. He's got the more interesting things going on. He's the far more interesting character. Cassian's decent, but, he's not doing anything. Stellan Skarsgård's character has done more in his smaller scenes than any other character, and he's the most interesting by far. So I'm watching this to follow him, and that pains me to a degree because I want this show to be really, really decent. Now it's a step in the right direction because we have proper character growth. We know who everybody is. We're even the new characters in the 4th episode here being introduced. Their motivations for what they do are at least laid out right away and who they are. But there's none of that required action to set up, to make the episode worth the visit. And that's the key. This is why Andor, alongside the fact that it's a return well to that era, isn't going to save Star Wars. The Mandalorian can, but it has to be freed of the shackles that are currently oppress it from every angle, trying to screw it up and throw a wrench in the works. Once those shackles are gone, that's the timeline you follow, because it has all the elements. It has action. Action isn't in every episode, but it's in 75% to 80% of the episodes. There's usually something in each going on, whether it be Grogu being trained, or Mando going to collect on a bounty or something like that to fill the time, like he did in those 2 insert episodes from season 3 into the Book of Boba Fett. Those were fantastic. It started, one opens up with action, and from that point you're satisfied and happy to be there because you've gotten the action hit. That said, Star Wars, the stamp, the music, the stakes, especially for a character whose future is unwritten. Andor's future is written. It ends in a beautifully tragic but heroic fashion. In many ways, this is a story that didn't need to be told. It's the elevation of a supporting character to an insert story that is smaller in value and scope than the main story was. Here, this is a finite thing, and soon, whether it's by the end of this season or not, they're going to be jumping ahead several years. Do we have to wait for that jump to happen before action actually kicks in? I think maybe yes. Andor will not save Star Wars, but it is a good start because at least they focused heavily on the quality of storytelling. Working within possibly a constrained budget, who knows, but all the sets, everything's believable. I like, seeing the infrastructure of Coruscant, for instance, the more, not just the buses from the previous episode, the space buses. I love details like that. I love seeing it in an environment where, in a role-playing game setting, sitting around a table with paper and dice and all this kind of thing, where you can have some real fun and exploration. Or even in a video game, to be able to explore a place like that, that'd be fantastic, and see those infrastructure similarities to our own world. Pardon me. That's fun. But in Star Wars, I want to see action. I'm getting more remake of Battlestar Galactica vibes, where there's several episodes where no action is happening other than the story unfolding. Where there, in those story episodes, the action quotient was the development of those tensions and the problems. But they were action in a different sense. But stuff was happening. Stuff happened. The stories were furthered, and then when the big battles and stuff happened, or even the smaller skirmishes, they paid off. Here, and that would be like you'd get one episode opening up with action, something else would maybe a little bit less action, but helping to set up the state of things, and then the next episode they'd be working towards the next big thing of action. or even having it in the next episode, because you had to have the reason for people to come back to watch, especially when the first episode sets out the tone. The first episode tone set out here in Andor was really small and didn't do anything to set up who he was and the reason for us to watch him. It's living off of the credit that Rogue One set up. It's not paying off. It needs to pay off, and it didn't. So this first impression episode is a failure when it comes to giving us a reason to watch. And it hasn't paid off yet. He had a lucky shootout and help in the third episode. He hasn't proven his worth. And in the fourth one, he's been sold based off of, he's been sold to help out this team pull off this Ocean's 11 job, bank heist, and he hasn't yet proven his worth to the audience, let alone having to prove it to a team that he's been put on, who have taken him on based upon Stellan Skarsgård and Luthen's word. It's, in many ways, it's a failure of basic storytelling. And you got 40 some odd minutes, nearly 50 in some cases, to pull this off. When an 80s cartoon can put across the same amount of story, like Thundercats, Transformers, G.I. Joe, can put across the threat, set the stakes, and sometimes even resolve the problem, and have action, comedy, drama, tension, all inside of what amounts to a 22-minute episode, or 25-minute episode, including opening and closing credits. There's, that's a good counterpoint for comparison versus what's happening now. This is great and all, but overall, it is kind of, for those who want more action, more Star Wars-y action, this is extremely boring. The details, the costumes, I'm loving everything that they're putting in here. In episode 4, now that we're seeing more Imperials, which means probably next episode we're going to see some Stormtroopers finally. I'm not a fan of the sets being all too white. All the characters, except for their heads, essentially disappear if you blur your eyes. You can't follow anything. Well, you can follow it visually, it's there, but it's visually boring. Those white uniforms, the rooms that they're in should be darker colors, more familiar Imperial colors, where, those costumes pop and stand out against the background. So there's a couple of small visual problems, but other than that, it's not bad. The writing is really, really good. The dialogue is fantastic. This is why Stellan Skarsgård just shines in this show. But all right. So I'm going to wrap it up there before I start going in circles. But Andor is not going to save Star Wars, but it is a step in the right direction because they've taken it, a definite focus on the quality of storytelling. But when it comes to correcting, sometimes they overcorrect, and action needs to be pumped up. There has to be at least some form of action. Oh, so before I wrap it up, let me give a definition of action. Now, let's use small, medium, and large sizes for easy explanation. Going to a casino, you're going to expect people to do some gambling, and there's action in that tabletop sport and gambling. It has its own tension, it has its own physical action, it has its own results that can be positive or negative. That's a small form of action. Average action is a fight scene. There to average, you have fight scenes and all this kind of thing, stuff to happen that is to scale for a story. The episode 1 with the two corporate cops getting killed. Uh, that wasn't action. That was something that was like one thing happened. It was barely even action. That should have been a bigger fight. If he's such a scrapper, such a survivor, Andor should have been almost nearly Steven Seagal BS on their asses, but he wasn't. He did. There could have been an opportunity because he was unarmed. If he had any physical skill, if you're going to be able to dare to get into somewhere, you're going to need at least some hand-to-hand skill going on, even if it's street fighting, brawling. You have to show that. And he acts like he can take a punch, but so far he's just run away and been a bit of an opportunist. Now I don't need a complicated martial arts fight, especially with a couple of rent-a-cop types. You know, one thin, one beer gut. Like, that's not realistic. But a brawl, a short street fight, some punches getting thrown, a couple of kicks, you know, then a disarming happened. That would have been perfect, and that would have been a more appropriate bit of action for that. And it would have gone a long way to set up, he set up Andor as a character, as a reason for them to even invest making a series out of him. But this is what it comes down to. There's still an overcorrection that's drowning out a very important aspect of what Star Wars is. And this is a problem. Andor will not save Star Wars. At best, it's a radar ping showing that they're going in the right direction. That certain grubby misandrous myths have been pulled off, at least to an extent, or handcuffed themselves. That would be great. But however, yes, if it has the name Star Wars on it, it has to have action. It has to have something going on. And, the one thing this gets right is it's occupation era and there's stuff going on. And there's a lot of sneaking around that has to be done. But you can work in different forms of action that prove the character's worth and why they're in the story, or having a show made about them in the first place. Anyway, that's my review of the series Andor so far. I hope you like it, but these, again, are just my opinions. And if you love it, fantastic. I'm hoping it picks up. I'm hoping it makes the time I've invested in it so far watching it worth it. However, I have my doubts. Anyways, I'm getting sweaty in this armor. I'm going to go get changed before I start making my own gravy. Laters. Bye.